Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today, I want to talk about two words that I've been hearing a lot lately: ceremony and ritual. These words are everywhere right now in spiritual communities, in wellness spaces, in healing circles, and even in commercial spaces where ceremony has become something that you can purchase. And most of us use these words interchangeably as if they mean the same thing, but they don't. Well, not exactly. Within these two words, there is more than one meaning, which is why things are so confusing. So today, I want to slow down and actually untangle all of this. What is a ceremony? What is a ritual? How are they different? And what is actually happening psychologically, energetically, and spiritually when we step into either one? Because I genuinely believe that when we understand something more deeply, we can engage with it more honestly and more powerfully. So let us begin. Part one: what is a ceremony? At first, I wasn't very sure on how to define this. I knew what a wedding ceremony was. I knew about funerals, graduations, military ceremonies, ceremonies welcoming someone into a spiritual order or community. Those made sense to me because they felt formal, significant, and structured. But then I started seeing people call very personal, simple acts ceremonies too, like taking a bath, or going on a full moon walk, or burning a letter after a breakup. I started wondering, where's the line? Like, what actually makes something a ceremony versus just a meaningful moment? And at its most basic level, a ceremony is this: a structured and intentional act that marks a moment as significant. And the most important part of this sentence is marks a moment as significant, because we move through hundreds of moments every single day without ever noticing them. We wake up, make coffee, answer emails, check our phones, move through our routines. Essentially, most moments pass us by unmarked. But sometimes something happens where we instinctively know matters, such as a beginning, an end, a death, a marriage, a loss, a transition, a commitment, a letting go, or a becoming. And throughout human history, across every culture and every era, human beings have always reached for ceremony during those moments. Why? Because ceremony helps us stop and say, this matters, I'm paying attention, something in my life is changing here. Ceremony doesn't just hold intention, it activates it. Ceremony takes something internal, such as a feeling, a realization, a transition, a grief, a vow, and gives it shape in the physical world. It asks us to consciously acknowledge what is happening instead of unconsciously drifting past it. And that changes something within us. Part two: the anatomy of a ceremony. So, if ceremony is a structured act that marks a moment as significant, what does that structure actually look like underneath? Well, this is where it gets fascinating. An anthropologist named Arnold van Gennep spent years studying ceremonies and rites of passage across cultures all over the world. And what he found was remarkable. Despite differences in religion, geography, symbolism, language, and tradition, sacred ceremonies across humanity tended to follow the same underlying pattern. And he called these three phases separation, liminality, and reincorporation. And once you see this map, you'll recognize it anywhere. The first phase is separation. This is the moment you consciously step out of ordinary life and signal that something different is beginning. You are essentially saying, ordinary time is pausing, something significant is beginning, I am crossing a threshold. How that separation happens varies enormously, but the function stays the same. The second phase is liminality. The word comes from the Latin word for threshold. This is the heart of the ceremony, the in between place. This is the place where you are no longer who you were, but not yet who you are becoming either. We all know this place. Going through a divorce, losing a loved one, moving out of our parents' house for the first time. There is a period where the old identity no longer fits, but the new one has not stabilized yet. You are in between worlds, and sometimes it can be incredibly disorienting. And according to Van Gennep, this is precisely where real transformation becomes possible. Insights arrive, emotional releases happen, vows are spoken, something inside of you moves. So, how do we actually get into this liminal space? It doesn't happen by accident. Throughout history, human beings have used what anthropologists call technologies of transition, deliberate tools designed to shock or soothe the ordinary mind out of its everyday routine. Sometimes it's psychological. such as rhythmic drumming, intense breath work, fasting, or sacred plant medicine that literally shifts our brain waves and open the subconscious. Sometimes it's environmental, stepping into total darkness, isolation, or nature where everyday distractions can't reach us. And sometimes it's deeply symbolic, like changing what we wear, taking a vow, or burning a letter. These are the actions that crack the door open and push us through into the in between zone. They dissolve the ego just enough so that the real lasting transformation can actually land. The third phase is reincorporation. This is the return. The ceremony closes, you step back, cross the threshold into ordinary life. But I want to be clear about something. Reincorporation is not a moment. It is a process, and that process can take months, sometimes years. The ceremony marks the threshold and signals that something has changed, but the actual integration of that change, the living of it, and the embodying of it can happen slowly in ordinary life long after the candle is extinguished. Part three, the same anatomy expressed differently. Now, here is something I think is worth understanding. The anatomy is universal, but the expression is not. And what I mean by that is the underlying structure appears again and again across humanity, but the outer form changes enormously depending on culture, worldview, religion, symbolism, and context. Take a graduation ceremony. It follows all three phases almost perfectly. You leave behind your ordinary identity as a student, you cross that stage in a symbolic threshold moment, and then you return to the world carrying a new social identity, graduate. But there is no drumming, no invocation, no altar, no altered states of consciousness. It is civic, formal, and institutional. Now compare that to a shamanic fire ceremony. The same underlying structure exists, but the outer expression changes dramatically. The separation phase might involve purification with smoke or building a sacred altar. The liminal phase might involve chanting, drumming, prayer, breathwork, or symbolic offerings intended to shift consciousness and open the inner world more deeply. And the reincorporation phase might involve silence, reflection, integration, or speaking what was received. Same underlying skeleton, but completely different expressions. And this is what I personally find so beautiful about ceremony as an ancient human technology. The outer forms vary endlessly, but underneath them is the same intuitive understanding. If human beings are going to consciously cross thresholds, we need ways to leave ordinary reality, enter transformation, and then return carrying meaning back into our life. This understanding is ancient, and I think in many ways it belongs to all of us. So, if ceremony is this grand architecture, a structured map that holds our life transformation, how do we actually move through that map? What is the fuel that makes that architecture work? So, to understand this, we have to zoom in on the individual building blocks. Part four. So, what is a ritual? Now, let's talk about ritual because this is where things get genuinely confusing, and I think it is worth naming that confusion directly. The word ritual actually carries two very different meanings depending on who is using it. The first is the everyday secular meaning. When someone says, my morning ritual is making coffee and journaling before everyone else wakes up, essentially what they mean is that they have a repeated, comforting habit, something they do regularly that creates structure, rhythm, and a sense of grounding in their day. This is the lifestyle definition of ritual, and it is completely valid. These kinds of rituals anchor us. They regulate our nervous system, they remind us of what matters, they help us stay connected to ourselves. But in a spiritual, symbolic, and anthropological contexts, ritual often means something much more deeper than habit. A spiritual ritual is a symbolic act, an intentional action where what you are doing on the outside represents something much larger happening on the inside. It's not just the action itself, but what the action means. Think about your evening shower. As a routine, it's hygiene. As a sacred ritual, it becomes a symbolic act of releasing what you are carrying, washing away the energy of the day, the weight of a difficult conversation, the residue of something you want to let go of. The intention and the symbolism transform it into something else entirely. And that is where it gets interesting because the line between a secular routine and a sacred ritual is not fixed. It is made entirely of intention. A routine becomes a ritual the moment you bring conscious meaning to it. Making tea is just a drink until you consciously decide, I'm slowing down, I'm returning to my body, I'm giving myself a moment of care. And in that moment, something shifts. Not because the action changed, but because your relationship to the action changed. Part 5, Ceremony versus Ritual, the real distinction. So now that we've looked at both, how do they actually differ? The distinction I personally find the most useful is ritual tends to work more directly on the inner world. Ceremony tends to formally mark, witness, or hold transformation. Ritual is often intimate, psychological, energetic, and symbolic. It can happen entirely alone, no audience required. Ceremony, on the other hand, creates a container that acknowledges something important is happening here. It makes transformation visible. It gives structure to transition and it formally marks a threshold. And of course, there is overlap. Ceremonies can transform us internally, and rituals can also make inner experiences visible or tangible. But generally speaking, ceremonies create the container, rituals are the symbolic acts within it. Take, for example, a wedding. The ceremony is a larger threshold event. The rituals inside it are the exchanging of vows, rings, the first kiss, or the lighting of a candle. Each ritual carries symbolic weight. Each is doing their own inner work. The ceremony holds the rituals. The rituals do the inner work, and together they move people across thresholds in a way that is felt, not just witnessed. Part 6. What makes either one real? So whether you're stepping into a ceremony or ritual, what actually makes it work? Because I think a lot of us have had the experience of going through the motions, showing up, doing a thing, and feeling nothing on the other side. At least I know I did, especially in my younger years. I participated in things I didn't really understand, couldn't have told you why they mattered at all, and walked away unchanged. So what makes the difference? A few things. Intention matters. You have to genuinely understand why you are doing it. What are you marking? What are you receiving? What are you grieving? What are you committed to? Presence matters. You actually have to be there for it, not distracted, not performing spiritually, not curating an aesthetic experience, but fully present with yourself and what is unfolding. And structure matters, especially for ceremony. There needs to be an entering, the moment that causes separation, a middle where the inner work happens, and a deliberate closing where you consciously return. That three-phase map is not just theory. It is what makes a ceremony actually work. It allows experience to land within the mind, body, and soul, not just pass through it. And honestly, I have seen this in very ordinary moments too, not just elaborate spiritual ceremonies. It can be someone sitting quietly and burning a letter they never sent, or a veteran who finally visits a memorial and finally allows themselves to grieve, or standing in the ocean after divorce and consciously releasing an entire chapter of their life. When intention, readiness, presence, and structure are all there, something genuinely shifts. Ceremony and ritual are ancient human technologies for metabolizing change, and they work. So this is what I want to leave you with today. Ceremony and ritual are not just trendy spiritual words. They are some of the oldest tools human beings have ever created for navigating transformation, grief, identity, transition, meaning, connection, and becoming. Ceremony marks the threshold and makes it visible. Ritual does the inner work of crossing it, and underneath both of them, in every culture and in every tradition that's ever existed, the same ancient wisdom lives. Some moments are too important to let pass unnoticed. And honestly, in a world that moves as quickly as ours does now, where we can barely pause to grieve, celebrate, transition, reflect, or integrate, I think we need these things more than ever. The intentional act of saying, this moment matters, I am here for it, and I'm willing to fully meet it. I hope this gave you something to reflect on, something to feel into more deeply. And if this sparked anything in you, I would generally love to hear about it in the comments. If you enjoyed today's video, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And remember to tune in, listen deeply, shift completely, and bloom. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.